Chair. I'm replacing Deputy Jean O'Kenny, who's actually a member of this committee, and thank you all very much for the work you do and for coming along here today. But I have to say, I just feel that we're in the middle of something really weird, that drip feed bits of information keep coming at us here as elected politicians, and we're not getting the full truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. For example, Minister, you've just told us here this morning that there'll be parts of the new National Maternity Hospital which will be occupied by other elements of St Vincent's Healthcare Group that have been displaced, and you can't clarify for us if that'll be all public, all private, or a mixture of both. And I find that really upsetting, that we're getting this drip feed information bit by bit when we have an opportunity to delve down. Now, Kieran Devan said earlier on, we've been really debating and listening robustly to queries about this project for the last year. Well, we've been in here asking questions for the last year and getting absolutely no answers. I don't know how many times most of us here in the opposition stood up in the Dáil and asked for full debates about what is the future of the National Maternity Hospital. We're now getting it after kicking up a fuss and being told that we're guilty of a campaign of dis or misinformation. But today you've come in and you're remembering the moment of repeal, the seismic shift that that meant for the women of this country. All of you were engaged in that campaign, whether you were knocking on doors or advocating for it, and that was really helpful. But repeal did change everything. And I just want to ask the question, when you look back at the history of the debate and the discussion and the negotiations around the new National Maternity Hospital that go back to 2012, 2013, it seems to me that from what you've told us here today, the bones and the structures were all agreed pre-repeal. And how much did post-repeal Ireland change that discourse and that discussion? Because it must have done. And a lot of that discourse and discussion took place when the sisters or the nuns were still on the field. We're told now they're gone from the field. And we're repeatedly told that there's no religious influence going to be allowed. Well, I just want to put this thesis to you. In the same week that we got the announcement that the Cabinet were about to sign off on this arrangement, the US Supreme Court leak happened that Roe versus Wade was about to be seriously challenged and possibly taken down. For me, as somebody who's fought for repeal and abortion rights all my life, that was quite shocking, because I understand, as do many, many women in this country, that for women's health care, when it comes to reproductive rights, you make 2 steps forward and you can take 4 back, because there'll always be a kickback and a backlash against women's rights. It's part of the nature of the way our society has been structured. Women's oppression has always been about we make gains and they backlash against us. And religious interference doesn't always appear in nuns with long veils and traipsing the corridors, Mother Mary Aiken images. That's not what we mean when we talk about religious interference. We mean a deep-seated, deep-rooted prejudice and inbuilt thinking about women's health that goes into the heart of the civil service, into the heart of the health service, into the heart of the political establishment. And it's something you can't see. It doesn't wear a veil, but it does traipse around our bodies and our lives all the time. And I'm seriously, seriously worried that that cannot be just, dismiss that. We've said it many times, 6 times the Minister said it's in the Constitution, no religious interference, no religious interference, and it can't be true. That is just nonsense. That is not the way it works. And I'm delighted that you acknowledged here this morning, Minister, that there's a much more deep-seated sociological reason for the mistrust around this deal, that is not just head cases like me giving misinformation or other head cases out there. There's a deep-seated reason for it. Now, we have to deal with that deep-seated reason. And to deal with it, we need much more than we've got here in terms of there be no religious interference reassurances from you. And for that, we need to know, why do the St Vincent's Healthcare Group, who will have deep-seated, deep-rooted ties to the religious orders, have the right to appoint 3 board directors, have the right to appoint the chair every few years? Why do they have that? If this is to be an utterly independent national maternity hospital for the women of Ireland to deliver all reproductive and maternity care, why do they want that interest? And they seem to really, really passionately want it. Their fact sheet is extremely interesting. And their fact sheet is not the sort of facts you give us. We own it, we own it. This man here, I'm sorry I can't see your name, keeps telling us that we effectively own it because of these leasehold rights. Actually, we don't. St Vincent's Healthcare Group say they own it. They own the land and they own the rights and they are on the board because of this, that and the other. I'm deeply suspicious of their interest in this project. And as a Minister for Health, who is involved in devising Sláinte Care, I do not understand why we would take all this money, all this public money, this opportunity to create a truly one-tier medicine, no discrimination against people on the depth of their pockets or the size of their wallets, an absolutely clear, publicly owned, publicly funded national maternity hospital. Why we don't take the opportunity to have that? And that's clearly not what we have. And the plot thickens when you tell me about the private elements that are going to be in the building, the clinical independence stuff. Come here. Somebody mentioned Savita Halappanabar. I think of her every day, but I didn't want to mention her name. But now that she's been dragged up, somebody, as she was dying, took a decision to say it is clinically inappropriate to give her the abortion she asked for and her husband asked for. Somebody took that decision. And even then, pre-repeal, it was legally permissible to do that to save her life. Now, clinical appropriateness can be made in a decision by somebody who does not agree with my view of the right to choose of a woman's control of her own body. And that could still happen. With that phrase in there, mixed up with the legally permissible and clinically appropriate, it is absolutely obfuscating in terms of where do women stand, what about what they want, rather than what the clinicians want. And we just need much, much more delving down into this. We need more time and we need more reassurance. And I honestly believe that if we removed the ownership of the land from the equation, then we get rid of this, you know, as been called labyrinthine, Kafkaesque structure of 3 boards of management with 3 constitutions, with 3 ways of appointing people. And we deal as a state directly, once and for all, with the future of women's health. And I'd like you, particularly the clinicians and the Minister, to address those concerns I still have, despite this long debate today.
Thanks very much, Deputy. First of all, I fully agree and appreciate you acknowledging this is a deep-seated mistrust that goes back for generations. And it is absolutely understandable that that mistrust is there, right? I'll make a few quick points. The first is, a view has been expressed that if we just owned the land and the building and it was a HSE hospital, right? So you take the current NMH, all of that out to be a HSE run hospital. Can I just say that right now there are 19 maternity hospitals or units in the country. At the start of the year, 10 of them provided services. By the end of the year, 14 of them will provide services. So we're all moving in this direction. Right now, there's 11. The 8 that don't provide services are HSE hospitals. We own the land, we own the building, and there's no voluntary structures whatsoever, right? So the hospitals that have actually led post-repeal are the voluntary hospitals. They're the people sitting with us here today, right? So the idea that has been put forward that, well, if they were just HSE-owned hospitals, that would solve the problem. Well, clearly it wouldn't, because the 8 hospitals that don't provide it are HSE hospitals. I just make 2 more quick points. One, the ownership of the land is not linked to appointment of directors. You know, so for the ownership of the land under Holles Street is the Earl of Pembroke, whoever that is, right? They have no influence. If you, Deputy, owned the land and we were getting a leasehold ownership for 300 years from you, you would not be appointing any directors. The directors are being appointed because this is a partnership. And remember, the NMH, which doesn't own the land under Vincent's, is appointing directors to that board as well. And I might ask the clinicians, I wonder, could we ask Mary Brosnan to come in? Just on this point, right? Yeah.
Because everything you say conflicts with the fact sheet from the St Vincent's Hospital Care Group. When you say we own the land, they say we own the land. When you say we have what interest do we have in it, they say they have an interest in it. So why does this is the question they ask, why does St Vincent's Healthcare Group require ownership of the land? Land ownership is essential to ensure the ongoing provision of the best possible care for patients attending St Vincent's University Hospital and the National Maternity Hospital. That's not what you say. They say something different. You say land ownership is irrelevant. They say it's very relevant.
I'm sorry, Deputy,
Why have they got this continued interest in it?
So just to be clear, I'm saying land ownership has nothing to do with what is going to go on in the hospitals, and it's not why directors are being appointed.
Sorry, they say something different. You are all talking from different hymn sheets. It doesn't help. Could you have a meeting with them and sit down and say to them, why do you say this when we say that? Why do you say you own it when we say we don't? Could you really get your act together? Because it doesn't bode well for a future partnership for our healthcare that you're all saying different things about the actual structures.
The structures have been explained in detail by the lawyers. What is being said very clearly is that Vincent's have the freehold, and for the next 300 years, the state will have the leasehold ownership, right? That's the position. Now, I might ask Mary Brosnan to come in. She hasn't spoken yet.
Can I just make one point just first on that, and I think it's the same fact sheet you're reading from. So they do have a question, who owns the NMH? And the answer to that is the new NMH DAC will be part of St Vincent's Healthcare Group, which is the subsidiary. We've all talked about the protections. It says the hospital building will be owned by the Irish state and will be operated by the new NMH DAC under an operating licence agreement for the HSE. The land is owned by SVHG, which is not disputed, it's a freehold interest, and is leased for 299 years to the Irish state, which I've said previously is sufficient length of time for whatever building will be constructed on that. And they go on to say this is not unusual. Many state institutions are lands not owned by government. And I would also say, as a property lawyer, it is not unusual that buildings are constructed on leasehold interests. So if Mary wants to...
And to be clear, there's nothing that has just been read out from the Vincent's fact sheet that is different to anything that has been said here. But I wonder, could we hear from Mary Brosnan on the
Please,
other
yes.
points, if that's okay, Deputy?
Thank you, Deputy Smith. And I suppose I've been involved, as many others have, for 9 years on the actual project. So I'm the Director of Midwifery for the last 15 years in the National Maternity. So I'm passionately interested, as are so many stakeholders in this project. You asked about particularly why dermatology is in the building, so maybe I'll answer that very simply by saying there are very, very detailed maps available for everybody to scrutinise this, but a lot of the Vincent's current campus has had to be disrupted, or that will be disrupted, to build this very large structure. So it's 50,000 square metres in or around. 35 to 40,000 square metres of that would be actually the National Maternity Hospital's business. There's a lot of that part of that campus that will be shared services. In particular, all the catering, all the sterile services department, they will all be shared, and quite a lot of other facilities. And the other element of this is that St Vincent's will then, current campus will lose a lot of their space, like procurement, ward areas such as dermatology, transitional care beds. All of those areas had to be planned into the new service. So there's a very large, long L-shaped building that you'll see in the plans. It's at the moment it's configured as a red block in the diagrammatic schematic picture you'll see. But if you drill down into it, there's an L shape. It's built into 5 or 6 different elements of our own big build, our hopefully our the shared services, and then what St Vincent's need to build to replace what we're taking over. It is very complicated because it's a working hospital. It's the largest campus hospital in South Dublin, in Leinster almost. And so they are going to require a huge amount of work to be done in the middle of a working campus. So it is complicated. We phased it. There was originally talk about doing it in 2 phases. It's now hopefully going to be built in 1 phase. So we're very comfortable that the language that was put into that document protects maternity and women's health and neonatal services for the future.
Can I ask Mary, to the very reasonable points Deputy Smith is asking about a deep-seated and not always obvious religious influence?
Yeah, it's not always in the habit.
Yeah, and I think every woman, every citizen in Ireland probably has been listening to that debate, and I can only say from a professional perspective that as midwives and clinicians working in the hospital, as nurses working and providing all of the services at the moment, we mentioned fertility, we mentioned termination of pregnancy, we mentioned sterilisation. All of those things are happening without religious influence, and we know that they will continue to happen. 10 years ago, it is 10 years ago that Ms. Savita Halpanavar passed away. tragedy for every person involved, in particular her family and all the community. We know that the legislation since then has protected women's interests, and termination of pregnancy is it's now legal. It has now been provided in many of the hospitals in the country, and that will continue in the St Vincent's campus.
Well, I know my time is up, so I just want to make a couple of remarks to finish. Fair play to you for having such confidence that you can guarantee the future women's health care in terms of abortion in this country. Nobody in the States can guarantee it for women in America, and they've had it long before we've had it.
I suppose.
And I just want to really, while I have a minute, I want to thank Professor Deirdre Madden and Dr. Sarah McLaughlin for their statement this morning. I think they've been hugely courageous in providing that statement to us. I think it should be published and everybody should read it. And in their closing paragraph, they talk about their concerns about governance and control. And they said that all legally permissible services in UNH boards also influence culture, values, ethics, and the entities that they govern. And this gives rise to legitimate concerns to us for the potential influence of ethos. Which is why I'll return to the fact that we have 3 sets of appointees of a board of management. Instead of a Minister for Health, whom I don't fully trust at the moment because of all the stuff I've heard that contradicts what I'm reading. But even if I trusted the Minister for Health, instead of the Minister for Health being able to appoint the directors of the boards or some entity that hasn't got the vested interests of the St Vincent's Hospital groups and others, I don't trust it, and I think lots of people in the country don't. So what we do have is a statement from these 2 eminent people who dissented from the decision on the 13th of March to go ahead with this deal on the 14th of March. And I think people need to take note of that statement, because the idea that ethos can be influenced in medicine is always there. We just need much more guarantees that just because the nuns have gone off the pitch, that influence of the St Vincent's healthcare group is not much more than it should be, much more weight given to it than it should be. And I want to thank them for taking the courageous step of making that statement. And I want to publicly ask you, Minister, to hold off on making this decision till we delve down much more into what's going on. And I understand, and I've heard Dr. O'Mahony repeatedly say how bad things are in Holles Street. I disagree with some commentators who've said it's like a slaughterhouse. It is not like a slaughterhouse. I've friends who gave birth there in the last year and they got on very, very well. So I think we need to calm down a bit, step back and really delve down into what we're doing here, give it a little bit more time. If we've already given it 8, 10, 12 years, whatever it is, it can take another little bit more time to get it right. We took a long time with the National Children's Hospital, costing us a load of money, but at least it's been built on a campus where they own the land and they're sharing the state-of-the-art facilities and medical facilities with St James's, without all this nonsense of 3 boards of directors and 3 constitutions and 3 mixed up ways of dealing with things. Why could we not do a National Children's Hospital St James's on this? Because St Vincent's Healthcare Group don't want it. They want a huge influence in this hospital.
Just come back in on the comment about a slaughterhouse. I would take grave exception to that description.
Well, somebody did use it, nobody here.
I just would like to put on the record that the existing hospital is an extremely safe facility run by an amazing group of people across the board there. I would really take issue with that comment. I think we need to make the point that the existing facilities are not purpose-built for 21st modern healthcare. They are managing to serve a community of people at the moment who are giving birth there today. Probably 20 women will give birth over the course of the day.
I think we all accept that, Dr. Brosnan.
Okay, but I think that language is really unhelpful.
Yeah, but it's not my language.
No, and I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Just one quick response, if I may, and I know we're way over time. Deputy, can I just go to the challenge, I think the very reasonable challenge you put forward, right? You said, well, you don't trust St Vincent's to appoint whoever to the board. You've, I think very unfairly, but it's your right, obviously, not to trust any Minister for Health. None of us know who the next Minister for Health will be, right? So then we don't trust the state to appoint directors. And indeed, we have 8 HSE hospitals. Are all of the hospitals not providing services? So clearly running it as a HSE hospital isn't the answer, because that isn't providing any guarantees. And so where do we go, right? We know that just simply having it as a public hospital on public land run by the HSE We know by definition that doesn't guarantee it, because all the hospitals not providing services are that model. You're saying you don't trust St Vincent's to appoint board members. You're saying you don't trust the government or future governments to appoint board members.
No, I didn't. I didn't say I don't trust everybody. You're making me out to be just not able to deal with anybody.
No, I'm not, Deputy. I'm not. No,
That's not what I'm saying.
No, I promise. I'm really just trying to come down to this. I'm taking what you're saying really seriously, and I'm just trying to address it. Right? None of us know who the next government will be, right, or who will be in a position
Minister,
to make
we are about to deal with the question of the hospitals and the GPs that don't provide it under the abortion review.
I appreciate that. Can I just wrap this up? And sorry, Deputy, I don't want to keep going on. So the question for all of us is, well, given that the HSE model on its own doesn't guarantee anything, people have raised concerns about the motivations of people appointing from various places. So then, what do we come back to? What is the rock that we are building these guarantees on? It's the constitution of the hospital. That's what matters.
3 different constitutions.
No,
there.
the NMH has one constitution.
Look,
there's one document, Deputy. There is one document. And the HSE, the document that matters here is the constitution of the National Maternity Hospital. So if people don't have faith in various directors being appointed, where do we go with this? Where we go with this is to the Constitution. And the Constitution states that not only can the new hospital provide all services, it must provide all services. It must, and it must do so without any religious influence. And if for some reason the hospital fails in its duties, the government can step in and direct it to do so.
Okay, Minister, I just think what you're doing here is you're creating a legal quagmire that potentially for the next 300 years will see people who don't want women to have the right to choose go in and out of court and challenge the construct of the National Maternity Hospital on the basis of this deal. And it's not that I don't trust anybody at all on the planet to do stuff. I absolutely trust the clinicians sitting here in front of me. I totally admire and trust the midwives and the nurses and the doctors. The problem we have in this country is that we have weak abortion laws that have allowed for the conscientious objection to be used all over the place without fundamentally giving women access to the rights that they should have. And I do want to see, and you want to see because you signed up to it, a national health service in this country which is freed up from voluntary, from charity and from private medicine. And that's where we have to go. And we're certainly not going there with this hospital and with this structure.
Okay.